This is the Scituate Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Today's date is Tuesday, May 4th, 2021, and the time now is exactly 6:30 p.m. In response to Governor Baker's declaration of a public health emergency and the related emergency executive order dated May 12, 2020, Town of Scituate public meetings shall meet remotely until further notice. This meeting will be recorded by Scituate Community Television and can be viewed live on Scituate Community Television Facebook Live. The recorded meeting will be available the following day on Comcast Channel 9 and YouTube Scituate Community Television.
And Ms. Sanders, Kate
Yes.
Swope has joined the meeting as well, just
Wonderful.
so you are aware.
Hello, Ms. Swope. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
All right, with that, I would like to call the meeting to order.
May I make a motion to open the meeting, Nikki?
Yes, and is there a second? Oh, we have some feedback. Is there a second?
Second.
Wonderful, and I will call the roll. Ms. Yassin,
Yes.
Ms. Risha,
Yes.
Ms. Silvera,
Yes.
Vice Chair Secor,
Yes.
Reverend Stewart,
Yes.
Ms. Dre,
Yes.
and my vote is yes.
And Ms. Swope, have you been voted in already?
Yes.
So
Okay.
you might ask her too.
Right, well, let's bring her in and introduce her, and then
Okay.
she'll be part of the meeting, but I want to do the safe space and norms. This is a safe space for people of color and for all underrepresented people and communities. Any comments that are inappropriate or have an animus in racism or bias will not be allowed. Your sound will be turned off if your comments are offensive to the meeting. This is a safe space where people can bring up challenges and questions without fear of repercussion or hostility. Take the learning, but leave the story so that people feel comfortable sharing their experiences. Assume best intentions. All participants are embarking on this journey at different starting points. Listen, read, and be kind. Use respectful language and ask when you are unsure. Any administrator may remove anyone with inappropriate content or acting inappropriately. Okay, with that, because Ms. Swope was not a part of the last meeting, I'm going to entertain a motion to accept the minutes. Did everyone have a chance to review the minutes? Was everything correct? Okay, is there a motion to accept the minutes?
Move to accept the minutes.
Wonderful. Is
I'll
there a
second.
Excellent, I'll call the roll. Ms. Yassin,
Yes.
Ms. Risha,
Yes.
Ms. Silvera,
Yes.
Vice Chair Secor,
Yes.
Ms. Stewart, Reverend
Yes.
Stewart,
It's okay. Yes.
Ms. Dre,
Yes.
and I say yes. Wonderful. So the minutes are accepted. All right, so we have a new member to our committee. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, Ms. Swope, and tell me how you'd like to be addressed.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Swope. You could address me as Kate or Miss Swope. It's just fine. I have been a Scituate resident for about 3.5 years, and I initially auditioned for the DEI committee when it first started. So I'm very, very excited to be joining at this point. I live pretty close to the lighthouse with my wife and our 2.5-year-old son. And I've worked in affordable housing for many, many years. Currently, I work at a real estate firm called Peabody Properties. We specialize in managing properties that are affordable, and I oversee all of our resident services for the company. And happy to answer any questions at all. Excited to be here.
Thank you very much. And you are very welcome. Very excited to see you. So can we just go around and introduce ourselves, the liaisons and the committee members. And if you are a voting member, please just say, or if you're a liaison, just say you're a liaison. So that would infer that you're not a voting member. So I'm Nikki, and I am the chair of the committee, and I live in Scituate. We've been here almost 6 years. We have 2 kids, and yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Ms. Yassine.
Scene. Very glad you've been able to join us. I've lived here about 30 years. My 4 children are grown. I'm Muslim. Again, I think that brings my perspective, as well as we're a very, the rest of us, we're a very multi-ethnic family. My husband is an immigrant, as are all my daughters-in-law, and so a lot of different cultures.
Thank you. Reverend Stewart.
So I'm Reverend Natasha Stewart. I am the priest at St. Luke's Episcopal Church. I've served there for about 2.5 years. I live here in Scituate with my children. And I have a lot of different experiences, both from my personal life, living in diverse and different communities, multicultural family, as well as my work in the church. Lots of diversity stuff and work in third world countries and things like that. So that's my perspective.
Awesome. Mr. Clark.
Hi, I'm Bob Clark. I'm the Director of Human Resources for the town of Scituate. I've been in this position for 3 years. Prior to that, I was most recently the Associate Director of the City of Boston's Homeless Services. I worked in that position for that organization for 20 years. So I'm a Scituate resident as well. I've been here for 24 years, and I have 2 adult children who actually no longer live in Scituate, but and gone through the school system here and been brought up in this town.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Mr. Hayes. I had a nice conversation with Mr. Gates about you, Mr. Hayes.
Uh-oh.
No, it was very nice. No, we had a nice conversation.
My name is Mike Hayes. I grew up in Scituate, lived here all my life except for various times in California and Florida. I'm an attorney, currently still on COVID furlough. 4 children, all went through the school system. I have 5 granddaughters, 1 who is now a teacher in Scituate, and 4 little ones who are from 2nd grade down to preschool. So, and I've lived in Scituate continually since probably after I moved back from Florida, probably for the last 35 years. So, and I'm the school committee liaison, and happy to be here. And that's me.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. I forgot to mention that I'm also an attorney. I've just been doing the
great.
mom thing for quite a bit of time. So
I'm hoping to get back to it within a month or so, I hope.
yeah, well, we're headed in the right direction, I think.
Yeah.
Vice Chair Secor.
Tom Secor, been in Scituate for about 11 years now. 3 kids, 1 college student, and then a junior at Scituate High School and an 8th grader at Gates. I live a stone's throw from the lighthouse, so I walk around the lighthouse with my wife. You'll probably see us at some point. Looking forward to working with you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Secor. Ms. Dre.
I am Angela Ribeiro Dre. I grew up in Scituate. I'm an immigrant. I came to the United States at the age of 4 from Cape Verde. I have 2 grown children. I went through Scituate Public Schools. My children did as well. And I have 2 grandchildren. My grandson is now at Gates. So welcome, Kate. And I also live near the lighthouse, so I might see you and your wife and little one around. Look forward to seeing you.
Thank you, Ms. Dre.
We have that area of town covered.
Lieutenant O'Shea.
Hi, Kate. I'm Lieutenant Amanda O'Shea. I'm the Public Safety Liaison. I have worked for the town for about 18 years now. I also have an 8 and 10-year-old in the Scituate Public Schools. So welcome.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Miss Arnold. And I understand that you are leaving us soon, Miss Arnold.
I am, and I'm going to talk about that in my liaison report, if you allow. Hi, Kate. My name is Jennifer Arnold. I am the Assistant Superintendent at Scituate Public Schools. Before that, I've been the Assistant Superintendent for 4 years. Before that, I was the principal of the Jenkins School for 6. I am not a Scituate resident. However, I love Scituate. It's a great town full of wonderful people and a lot of people with a lot of talent and perspectives, and it's really a joy to work on this committee and in the school system on these DEI efforts.
Thank you, Miss Arnold. Select person Curran.
Hi, Kate. Welcome. So glad to have you. I've been in Scituate for 26 years. All my kids went through the Scituate Public Schools, been on the board of selectmen for about 7, school committee prior to that, and advisory board for about 7 years as well. Really happy you were still interested and joined us, so it'll be short there. But I'm a non-voting member of the committee, and they're doing great work. They've rolled up their sleeves and have really dug into a lot of things. So I know we welcome your perspective and your help. So thanks.
Thank you, Select Person Curran. Miss Risha.
Hi, Kate. Welcome. I'm Celia Risha. I've been a Scituate resident for about 5 years now, but first generation American and Bostonian. So I'm from Boston, and in my day job, I work for the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce. So trying to get more immersed in all things Scituate, but just happy to have you here.
Thank you, Miss Risha. Miss Silvera.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Welcome, Kate. My name is Lucia. I am currently working in the DPW office for the town of Scituate. My background is also in property management and real estate as well. I have 4 children. I recently moved to Hanover, lived in Boston most of my life and a little bit in Weymouth here and there. Yeah, I think Scituate is beautiful. I did have a negative experience, which is also the catalyst for me joining this committee. But since then, I've just met really wonderful people, and I'm hoping to, you know, keep this beautiful light on Scituate, despite some of the experiences that I've had. So welcome. We're happy to have you.
Thank you, Miss Silvera. Wow, that was a very warm welcome, Miss Swoop. All right, and I will reach out to you. I try and reach out to every single member individually, so I will do that at some point.
Okay.
You are now welcome to vote on anything that comes up tonight.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all for the warm welcome.
To call your name. Okay, so public comment. I know I did see that Ms. Burke is in the room, but Ms. Yassine, I wanted to give you an opportunity to update us on Stride, and then Ms. Burke, if we can unmute her, she can update us on Scituate Pride.
Thanks. And again, I'm thrilled that other people are going to be speaking also, because I hope that more people come forward to share the work that's being done for DEI in Scituate. I think it's very heartening to know that there are multiple groups, and I think not enough people know about these groups. So I'm a liaison from Stride, which is Scituate Together for Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity. It's a local organization that provides monthly informative meetings, educational programs, and advocacy. Their website is scituatestride.org, and can also be found on Facebook at Scituate Stride. On the website, you can sign up to receive newsletters about their monthly meetings and other programs. The last meeting was about the voting process, how local government works in Scituate, and is encouraging people to become aware of their local representatives and to go out and vote. So I would encourage people to look up Stride and perhaps see what else is happening in Scituate.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Yassin. And Ms. Burke.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Burke. I don't know if that's to say my address, 93 Marion. No, okay. So I'm a board member for Scituate Pride. We have great events planned for June. We recently got some nice recognition in Spirit Magazine, which is to bring some great recognition to Scituate for the Pride community. We just recently submitted our applications to the select board to get approved for a drive-up movie. So the drive-up movie, and then the other one will be, the application submitted was for a walk, which would be on June 26th. We also plan to have a presence at June 1st Friday event with a little ceremony just to kick off Pride. We'll be having different representation from the different Pride flags. And we'll have one of the people who was actually a panelist on one of our Straight Talk events, band, be playing at the bandstand that Friday. And then the last other two events we'll be doing is a Straight Talk event where we'll actually be having representatives from towns across the South Shore. So that'll be a great event for everyone to talk about their experiences in dragging out the hate from across the South Shore and people's experiences with overcoming that. And then the last is a series from a very distinguished speaker in the LGBTQIA plus community, Robin Oakes. And we'll be hosting that event for Zoom. So that's what we have in June planned.
We have a lot going on, and we also are trying to get a crosswalk, a rainbow crosswalk. That's something that was just approved in Hull. And then we have a website, scituatepride.com. We have Instagram. And what else do we have?
Oh, and the last thing is we actually have some special, so across the South Shore, some of the towns are distributing the progress flag to businesses. What we've done is we will also offer the progress flag to the businesses in Scituate, but we also are offering them the opportunity of basically it's covering the cost of the flag for a sponsorship to have our Scituate Pride flag hanging from the businesses. So any of the libraries, businesses, police station, anybody who wants a flag to contact Scituate Pride to hang that flag for the month of June to show support for the Pride community, but also for Scituate.
Awesome. We also have swag, so take a look at the website. Lots of stuff to learn, lots of articles, etc. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Ms. Burke. All right. Is there anyone else, anything else for the public comment section? Okay. All right, seeing none, we'll continue on to our next section, which is liaison report. So we're moving into old business, and let's start with Ms. Arnold.
So thank you, Chairperson Sanders, for allowing me to speak tonight, and good evening. In Scituate, at the school district, the latest efforts we've had are basically around the hiring of our new DEI director, Jamil Adams, who, if you are not familiar with him and you didn't meet him on the forum, or please try to attend a school committee meeting or something where he is, because he's an absolute dynamo. He is someone who I think will help Scituate Public Schools move forward with their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, and be the glue that can hold a lot of people together in terms of those efforts. So we have lots of different committees focused on this work, and he will be able to be the one who will be the bridge between all of those. And with that, I would like to ask if he can be the school district liaison moving forward, as the superintendent has asked that he become the liaison. He asked that of me. So if that's okay with you, I can give him the date of the next meeting. And if you wanted to let me know that, I will let him know. He knows of this organization.
Yeah, I actually reached out to him
Okay.
just by text message to say that when he's settled, we'd love to have him come to a meeting, but we'd also love him to be a liaison. That would be fantastic. Is there any objection to that? I don't see any.
I think it sounds wonderful, Nikki, and
Yeah.
I would be happy to put him in. Does that mean, Miss Arnold, you will no longer be, I'm just clarifying that you will no longer be the representative? Then I will start sending the emails off to Mr. Adams instead then when we do it.
Okay. Thank you.
Jen is about to enter her happy retirement.
Well, congratulations, Jen, but we will
Thank
miss
you.
you.
Well, I'll miss Scituate a
You'll
lot.
be very
Yeah.
missed in Scituate, believe me.
I'll really miss everybody.
Yeah,
The other thing that we have going on is we have what we're calling a DEI planning and response team. So I had touched upon this earlier in one of my reports. It's about how our protocol for reporting, investigating discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. So we're putting together a protocol. We're just developing it now. And it's so that we have a consistent process across the district, and that we not only on how we investigate these situations and the scope of them, understanding the scope of them, but also what happens when after we've investigated, what happens to all the parties, what's the education that must happen with the targets, the aggressors. And so we are developing that now, and my guess is Jamil Adams will take that over, and he'll do a great job. We have several administrators on that team, building leaders, and central office people. So that's exciting work that we've begun. And that's about all I have.
that's a lot. Thank you so much. I'm excited for all the new developments, planning and response team. That is amazing. We're excited to welcome Mr. Adams, and we're sorry to see you go, but I haven't even known you that long. And I don't think we've ever even met in person, but your reach is very far, and your effect on people's lives and children's lives is unmatched. So thank you very much for all you've done.
Thank you for saying that, Nikki. Thank you.
Okay, so select person Karen, do you have any liaison reports for us?
Hi, Nikki. Thank you. Not too much, really. Some of you guys met a couple weeks ago. Just remind everyone that there's an election on May 22nd, and there is a contested school committee seat race that folks should pay attention to. And then we have a board meeting next week. So the last meeting was pretty routine information, coming off a town meeting. So not a ton to report that's new.
Quick question on the, excuse me, on the school committee vote. And selfishly, I've just been having a hard time trying to find information on the two candidates. I mean, I know who they are, but maybe this is a question for other people too, but I can't find anything.
Usually the Chamber of Commerce will host an event. I don't know if each of them have websites out there. Do they, guys? I'm not sure. I haven't seen anything.
I don't think so. And
yeah, it's unfortunate.
I've Googled and I've checked Twitter and everything else and the Mariner, and there's nothing.
Yeah, I did the same, Tom, but there, Richard Taft does have a Facebook page, or, public. So I noticed he does have something on Facebook.
As does Mike Long. He also has.
Do they? Oh, good. So they're on Facebook then, Tom.
Yep.
I try to avoid Facebook, but I'll take the plunge.
I hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other liaisons? Anything else?
Mike. My case.
What'd you say?
My case.
Oh, Mr. Hayes, yes.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, and I'm going to be brief, and I apologize. I think Reverend Stewart will understand. I'm double booked.
Oh, that's
Because
okay.
I have a 7 o'clock meeting. I'm on the my church council, so
Okay.
I'll have to leave in about 5 minutes. But
You better not be late for that one.
no. And but we are just learning of a new incident in the Scituate Public Schools. I think it's probably going to be one of the worst we've had in quite some time. It involves shaming of women, people of color, different races, adults and children, and it went through apparently the middle school. So we're just getting to the bottom of it. And so I would urge everybody to watch our school committee meeting on Monday, because it's going to be addressed. And it is a awful and disgusting situation that is going to become a major issue, I think, in the town. So, so that's just a heads up. But we will be discussing it Monday at 7 o'clock, and I don't know any details yet, other than the extent of how bad it is, and that's about all I know. And I know the police are involved, and
Yeah, so I'm gonna stop you, Mike. I
Yep.
don't think this is the forum to be speaking about that right now.
okay, fair enough. Yeah, I'm not, just that we're going to address it at the school committee meeting on Monday, and I appreciate that, Amanda. Yep.
Right. I think anything ongoing does not get spoken about on Facebook Live.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Thanks,
Anyone,
Andy.
any other liaison reports? Okay. Thank you, liaisons, for all your work and for coming tonight. Let's see. I was hoping to have Miss Martell from the Mass Cultural Council visit today, but I'm looking and scrolling and I don't see her. So if she does show, then we may circle back. I had a conversation, I'll just say this. I had a conversation with her and we exchanged emails about cultural events. And she actually has grants funding for culture events beyond the ones that we have here now. She works with the Harbor Commission here in Scituate, and she also works with the Scituate Cultural Council. And she also works for the Mass Cultural Council and has the ability to bring attention and funds to cultural efforts here in Scituate and the other towns that she represents. So I thought she might be a really good person to talk to find out a little bit more about that portion of our town, those committees and commissions. So hopefully she will at some point join us if she couldn't make it tonight. Okay, discussion vote. Oh, process for incidents based in bias in the community. So the last time we were here, Representative Select Person Canfield mentioned that one of the things that this committee might work on or look at or give recommendations for is the process of how the community handles something when an incident takes place that everyone's kind of buzzing about or can see, and what that process should be. So I just wanted to brainstorm a little bit about what that might look like, or if anyone's heard from other communities and what they're doing. It sounds like the school is, putting together their own response. So I think we should spend a tiny bit of time just writing down some recommendations, and maybe we don't have an order, but for how to approach those situations once we find out about it. So I would say take it from someone on this committee is told that something's happened that is anywhere from an incident based in bias all the way through a hate crime. And what do we do? What process do we want to suggest? Does anyone want to go first?
I just want to say, I think the first thing that would be really helpful to me, because I sometimes have a hard time following the conversations when we talk about the thing that happened over the weekend or something sort of vague like that, and we don't actually name what the thing was. It's, you know, lots of things happened over the weekend in my mind. So I had the last meeting, I felt like there were like 2 or 3 moments where we talked about the thing and it was sort of assumed that we all knew. But when I went to look for the thing that happened over the weekend, and I felt like I knew what it was, I could find no information in the Mariner, on Facebook, on any of these places to give me a fuller picture. So I think one thing we need to be really good about as a committee is not talking about the thing that happened over the weekend, but naming the incident that happened at the Chinese restaurant and of vandalism. And just kind of naming it, even if it's a summary of it, we're naming the thing so that we all have a sense of what we're talking about. Because, you know, I got caught out both for not following ESPN and then for not completely being 100% certain we were talking about the Chinese restaurant until the conversation was kind of going on a bit. So I think naming is very powerful in and of itself.
Yeah, I agree with that. And incident to incident, you know, how we name it, I think is important because, you know, you want to be respectful of the victim of whatever happened and the amount of disclosure that they want. But I mean, the statement you made was simple, and it may be that we agree, or that whoever's gonna, whatever the process is, that the way to name it is consistent. So once this is the presentation of what happened, and the way to name it is whatever is decided. Who should make that decision, do you think, Reverend Stewart?
About what to name it? I think whoever, I mean, I'm assuming that somebody will, like you said, Nikki, somebody will have this incident brought to them, or they will have witnessed it, or somehow it'll come to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe that's the decision of I mean, we're all reasonable people. I think as long as we sort of all commit to leaving it somewhat vague, like the incident of vandalism at the Chinese restaurant, right? Like very vague, kind of like states what it is, but doesn't place blame on anyone or say anything more than what we really know in terms of legally, Amanda.
And I would encourage everyone that we can't talk about incidents that are hearsay or that we've heard rumor mill. Like, if things are spoken about here, they need to be based in facts. And so a lot of the things that even I've heard, some things I can't speak to because they're ongoing investigations, and some of them just completely are not true. And so if there are things that I can say, I will say them. But I think we have to be just based factually. I think we can't, you know, I heard X, Y, and Z. Like, this is not the forum for that.
Yeah,
Right.
Nikki, can I make a comment? Because I think what Karen's intention was for you folks maybe to see how other DEI committees are handling that relationship between the DEI committee and the board, right? So to Amanda's point and to Reverend Stewart's point, this isn't a forum where we talk about what we heard, right? I think what Karen wants to know, or what she had proposed, is that, okay, what is that process so that we can be better as a town at, you know, making sure that our residents feel safe, that we're addressing it, and that it isn't in a factual and legal manner. Because, you know, exactly what Lieutenant O'Shea was just saying is that a lot of times folks hear things on the street, right? but we, as an entity of the Board of Selectmen and as an entity of the town, you know, need to deal with facts and also respect privacy, also respect things that are still under legal investigation. I mean, we just need to be really mindful of all of that. So I'm pretty sure what Karen's intent was, like, hey, let's figure out if there's a better way in which we need to coexist. What is that? Okay, that was my understanding of her direction.
Yeah, I
So, Laura, sorry, what I heard her saying was that we need to sort of name incidences, not hearsay, but true incidences that we know happened. But then to sort of discuss it in a terms of a sort of, okay, what was missing in this incident? So did we need translators? Did we need people to help with certain things? Did we need therapy to come in? Like, what were the places where we as a town had an opportunity to support and to help that were missing in this particular incident? And so that's sort of our analysis. And then our feedback is not about exactly what happened, but it's about what better supports.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, so for instance, we have a social worker, right? So maybe it's the recommendation of the committee that the social worker be contacted at stage A, B, or C, whatever that is that you all want to take on and evaluate, right? Because that social worker is hired as the town in an official capacity, and maybe that's something that we need to take a look at.
So I can just touch upon that a little bit more. So anytime we have an incident that we believe is based in some kind of bias or that some follow-up or some service needs to be made, that happens right from the police station. The social worker, Erica Suarez, is wonderful. She's there. We have her within the department 2 days a week. And so she's able to do that. And so I would say that trusts that the police department, like, we are doing our job. And that if there is an incident, that we certainly are following up and providing or making recommendations to services that need to be met. And I just, again, I encourage people, like, I can't, on Facebook Live, I'm not going to speak to specific incidents in town. That's not fair to anyone.
Of course.
And so I would just reiterate the trust that you know, the police department is well trained and that we have people that are following up if follow-up needs to happen.
Yeah, I think that's important, Officer Shea. I appreciate your comment. I think our role, though, is to look at the current processes in place and look at it at a lens from DEI, and perhaps we can provide some recommendations. And there could be an opportunity, things that are working but maybe could work better or could help a victim in this case that is an immigrant. It may not be able to vocalize what she needs or what they need. So I think it is our role to look at the current process and to make recommendations that we can, you know, perhaps improve the process. I respect the police, and I do believe that you all do know what you're doing and you're good at your jobs. But I think there could be, you know, room for improvement if, you know, if we see the current process and, you know, speak to the people involved.
Yeah, and I think we're getting hung up again on process and exact details, right? We all know that we can't get into specifics of any ongoing investigation, but what is that process, and to look at it, and to Angela's point, if there is opportunity to help somewhere, then, you know, I think from her, the DEI lens is not a bad thing. I think everybody clearly understands that we don't talk about specifics. We don't insert ourselves into live, or if you will, ongoing investigations, but certainly to better understand those steps, Mandy, that the police take, I would say that whoever the liaison is from this group that took on public safety, let's put that at the top of the list, right? It shouldn't have to be a separate initiative. It can be part of that evaluation that we're all going through that, you know, I know Tom and you guys want to get to a little bit later, of all the departmental feedback, and that's a great thing to ask during that interaction.
Yeah,
I think
we should focus on process. So Maybe I can guide it a little bit better. So you find out that something's gone on and someone calls you and says, there's something that's gone on. I went and talked to the person and they're really shaken up and here's what they need. What happens next? Do we call someone? Who do we call? When do we call them? So I'm just saying, like, what is the steps that we should take? So who should be involved? Who should be contacted, right? Who should, what, if anything, should we make sure if we know about it? What questions should we ask? Who should we direct them to? Who should we call if they're unable to do it on their own? So that's the kind, so like step one, something happens, you name it without revealing too much about the person, and then you call who, right? Step two, you tell that person that you're supposed to call, here's, you know, what is going on, and here's, you know, what I've been told and heard, etc.
So
And
you
then-
want direction from the police on what those steps are if somebody reaches out to you personally as a committee member? Is that what you're saying, Nikki?
I mean, yeah, definitely. But what I'm saying is from this committee, what would we suggest be the process? Like what, like Reverend Stewart mentioned asking about, is there translation services or a social worker needed? Or if it's terrible, is there an ambulance need to be called or whatever? Because a lot of times the police are not the first people that know about what's happening, right? The people may go to someone they feel comfortable with, like our subcommittee / project team on incidence-based and bias. There may be people a part of that.
But
that
that's
they
not the
feel more
role,
comfortable
and that's
talking
what we have to be clear. That's what we have to be clear to our residents. And unfortunately, sometimes I have to say, people come to me about school committee issues and I have to say, you know what, would love to help you, but you got to go to Mike Hayes or you got to go to Mike Long. They're the school committee people. I can't tell them what to do.
Right,
And
so
that-
then you need to have a process that says, if you find out about it, first call so-and-so, then call so-and-so, and then do whatever. That's the process that I'm
Okay,
trying to
that you
help
guys
us
want to know. And
create.
I would say that needs to come from Mandy, if she wants to summarize that from us from a police aspect, you know, if somebody feels
I don't
that-
think this is about the police, though. I think it's about what process would we suggest as the DEI committee happen? And then the police, the select board or whatever can review what we suggest and fit it into what they can and can't do. But I'm curious about what process we would suggest happen if we find out something like this has taken place.
But so the original sort of charge that was developed for the subcommittee for incidents based on bias. So I'm reading it. Basically talks about collecting information on incidents based on bias, providing an anonymous way to report such incidents, and then to report monthly to the DEI committee. But Ms. Canfield's feedback was that that is outside the scope of what this committee should be doing. We shouldn't be collecting information based on bias. We shouldn't be seen as the forum for collecting that information. We shouldn't be an anonymous source. What we should be doing is, independent of any specific incidents, we should just be developing a recommendation for a process in which someone may be able to report incidents, but it wouldn't be this committee. So I really think that entire charge that we developed for the subcommittee needs to be revisited, because I think Ms. Canfield couldn't have been any more direct to say she really felt like it was outside the scope of what our charge was.
Yeah, we should review that. We definitely should.
And just to say, and even in doing that, I'm not even sure that we should be having discussions about incidents. We should just be talking about process. Right?
Process.
So
Right.
what is the relevance? I mean, how does that even enter into a specific incident? It's really about process. So I just, again, don't know that this is a forum in which we should be discussing incidents of bias, or even people should feel they could report it to us. It just really should be about process.
Okay, I disagree on the final part, but I do agree that it should be about process. I think that if you create a DEI committee, and I know that people feel comfortable coming to you because you're a part of the DEI committee, it speaks to what you value and what you find important, and it happens to be them if they're part of the underrepresented people. But I do want us to focus on process. So
I just want to read from what Karen sent us. It says, any gathering of public information would, at a minimum, need to relate solely to policies and procedures of the town. DEI is not the place for the public to report racial incidents. DEI does not have the authority of the directive to address any reports. The intent of these subcommittees need to be articulated, aligned with the charge presented as a recommendation to the board.
okay,
To the
so then we
select board,
should
sorry.
step back and say, is it a recommendation of ours that a DEI committee be a part of that process? Is that something we would like to recommend? That's one. And then two, what is the process that we would recommend? What would we say we feel the process should be? So we're recommending that we be involved. Should we recommend that we be involved? And if we should, what is the process that we think should take place? Does everyone get it?
Yeah, so Nikki, maybe a good next step is, since we're going to be going over the results from the town survey, if we are going to meet with the police department and fire department and public safety, essentially the first responders in many of these incidences, maybe one of those first questions, and I'm sorry, I forget who said this, could be around getting a sense of what is this process, so then we can review it and potentially make recommendations. And maybe one of the recommendations is to your suggestion just now of somewhere along that chain of who gets called, maybe it is somebody with DEI expertise on this committee or elsewhere to supplement, you know, the police and the social worker and whoever else. So maybe that's where we could be most effective.
Okay.
So I think depending on the nature of a complaint, there's going to be a sort of predetermined process. So if something's criminal in nature, there's a process already determined. If there's a complaint against an employee of the town, there's a process that's been determined. So, you know, I think maybe we can look outside the scope of those two examples and say, you know, if there's an example of, if it's a, you know, not a hate crime, it's not a discrimination claim against an employee of the town, but it's an incident that happens in the community, you know, that's maybe something that we don't necessarily currently have a process for.
That's exactly what I'm talking about, Mr. Clark. That's exactly what I'm talking about, a process for that. And she did say, well, if you think there should be a process, then recommend what that should be. But what I'm hearing from this conversation is that it's two-part. One, we should, if we think we should, recommend that that this committee is involved in some way in reporting these things if we hear about them. And two, what process we think, what should it look like? Or maybe we should just talk about things like Reverend Stewart did that we believe should be included in the process. For instance, call Lieutenant O'Shea. Is that a step in the process? Contact select person Canfield. Is that a step in the process? Ask the person certain questions. Is that a step in the process? Before, you know, before it reaches the level of what happens because there's a gap in what happens before it goes to town officials or whoever we're supposed to call as part of our process. What is that? What do we do? What do we collect for information? All of that. Because everything doesn't rise to a hate crime, right? And a lot of people don't have the same experience with police as the average American. They may come from countries where basically you call them and you die. So if we are approached, what should we do? What should we do? And the fact is, whether we like it or not, because we have agreed to be on this committee and to take up this work, people see us as people that are approachable when these things happen. And so when that happens, what do we do? Who should be in the room? Who should be called, etc.?
I think though, I just want to echo what Angela was saying earlier, and I heard Celia saying as well, like that there are a lot of these processes in place, and sort of it's our job as this committee to review what those processes are and then identify the missing pieces. And we will need some examples to go off of things that have happened, just so we can sort of trace the root, and we will need the input from the police and from other officials that are called when these things happen. But I'm hearing very clearly from Bob and from the select people that, you know, we're not the place where people come and report them to. And I understand and appreciate that we may be safe voice, but that's not our role as a committee. And
No.
so
Right.
we need to plug into those processes that are already in place in town. And then our job as the committee is to review those processes as we're reviewing everything else, and then find the holes in those. So I was trying to say that there will be instances that in order to review those processes, we may need to review certain instances just as examples, and make sure that all of that was done, and make sure that there, you know, were there things missing in that particular situation that we could have done as a town better, but not as us, as DEI people. I think there's a lot already happening in town. The police are doing their job. They do it well. How can we support them and help them and make sure they have all the resources? And is there something being overlooked just because we haven't looked at it from this lens of DEI yet that we can add to?
Yeah, I think Reverend Stewart, I think you're echoing the mantra that Ms. Canfield was relaying to us 2 weeks ago. So I wrote down review, report, recommend. So those are the steps that we have to go through. And if during our review we do think that there's a gap in a particular process, whether it's reporting an incident that we think might be based on bias, and if, you know, the owner of a Chinese restaurant doesn't know where to go, well, that's a gap. And we need to hopefully work with whomever, the social workers, public safety, what have you, to resolve that gap through a recommendation. That's the way I view it.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Thank you. So there's a gap,
There's
right?
a gap that you've identified that you're not at a position yet to resolve because you haven't met and looked at what the process is yet, because you need to get to your departmental review portion first. So,
Well, I'll say this. So one of the things you said was, let's look at how other towns are doing. Other towns have human rights commissions, right? And people go to the commission and they say, like you would a discrimination case. When you have a discrimination case, you go to the MCAD. That's where it all begins. They do an investigation, and you may or may not file a lawsuit in court based on what they do to help you. So other towns have human rights commissions, and people come to the commission. The commission works with the police to either walk into the police station with someone or call the police station with someone. And it fills the gap of, I'm being told that you can't, my picture isn't moving, so I'll have to refresh in a minute. But it fills the gap of, not everybody comes directly to the select board and says, this happened to me. Not everybody goes directly to the lieutenant and says, this happened to me, right? But they might come to the lieutenant because she's on this committee, right? Or they might come to Miss Dre because she's on this committee, right? And they know that's what we do. When that happens, what are we suggesting is the process, right? Do we just keep it to ourselves? Do we call the lieutenant? Do we contact select person Curran? What do we think we should do, or do we not know what we should do?
I don't
So,
think I don't think we know. We need
so
to
you
meet
don't know. So
department,
again,
figure out what the process
I
is.
think it's
I
part
have
of
an
your,
idea.
Nikki, I think it's up to the people that you've all decided to start the review, as you know, Tom just said, right? He said, we haven't even started the review of what exists today. So I'm not saying there aren't gaps to be filled. I love everything that I'm hearing, but let's do it based on fact and based on knowledge. And then get back and report back what you found and then recommend, right? Nobody's disputing that there can be potential gaps that need to be filled from this lens. Not at all.
So I think we do have some suggestions tonight. And the very first suggestion that I thought was fantastic and that we can do better at is naming it in a way that is discreet and respectful of a victim, and with enough knowledge that people understand that something's happened. Otherwise, they're just going to name it themselves, right? So I think that is one thing that we can suggest, and I like that suggestion. I'll make a few more, and then we'll move on. I do think that a recommendation should be made to the select board that the town hire a DEI director. I think that's essential, and I think it's really important. I think a lot of towns have already done it. And the reason why is because they fill this gap. They fill the gap of a place to go, a part of the commission, if they have one, part of the DEI committee in the town. They fill a gap. And I think that's something that they should do, because they should be a part of conversations that involve this. Is this the way normal policing goes? No. Should it be part of policing? I say so, some people say not, okay? I do think that having someone of color in the conversation is always important. And if they're not in the conversation about what to do or what's going on or finding out information, then A, you may not get a great deal of information, or B, you may miss something because you wouldn't think about it. So if you don't have a DEI director, I think a person of color in the conversation about what to do should be present. If one of us, I would hope, and let's move on, but I would hope that if one of us knew that something had happened, that we would, at a minimum, report it to the select board. Whoever we felt comfortable talking to on the select board, whatever, that should be at a minimum what we do. And I do want us to think, and you can send me an email if you don't feel comfortable saying anything tonight, but I do want us to think about recommendations to this gap. Recommendations to this gap in our community on something happens and it doesn't go straight to the police and it doesn't go straight to the select board. What is that? And I propose that a solution is to either have a human rights commission separate from the town, and or make a recommendation to change what the charge, or add to the charge of this committee, that it include that reporting aspect, because there's no one currently in the town outside of the school system that's doing that. So that's my opinion on that. All right, anyone else, anything else on this topic?
Nikki?
Yes.
Those are all really interesting and I think really very deep suggestions. And and as you've said, you know, different towns are handling it in different ways. What I'd be interested in is that I don't know what each of any of these entail. What does it mean to have a human rights commission? What does that take? I mean, I have so many questions. You know, how did they set it up? Who's on top of them? Who's their hierarchy? Who do they report to? How much does it cost to have one of those? Why do they start? Do they start because you want one, or do you start because it was imposed upon you? I think I'd seen some human rights commissions that started because there was some major incident and they had to do it, and that the town was made to do it. Our town's actually, you know, starting these because it sounds like a very interesting concept that I have no experience with. What I'd be interested in is if you or others are interested in getting more information about this and presenting that to us, I don't feel able to have a discussion if I don't have information, preferably, and again, you know me, I need it in writing, something in advance. And not just a list of links, but kind of the information kind of digested a bit. So there's a lot of concepts. What would you actually recommend if you were going to choose one, and why? And why would that be the best one? Or what are the two top ones you'd look at? And I don't know if somebody's interested in working with you on that, but I think that that would be a very worthwhile thing to then put before our committee that we could then consider. Because right now we're kind of throwing it out there and yeah, it's interesting, and then it goes away.
Well, it wouldn't, yeah.
Really
I mean, I think in creating the incident-based and bias committee, it wouldn't go away. That would be their primary kind of thing to grapple.
But they're not in charge of a DEI director's position. They're not in charge of
well, they could, yeah, but
human rights
that recommendation could come out of a committee like that. I mean, a project team like that. So
it could, but then we're not but then bringing it to us here, it doesn't get us anything. So that is fine. If you're going to continue that in your committee, I can see that as something that would be very worthwhile.
Yeah, I think so too.
Can I say though that, you know, again, we're saying to creating a human rights committee to address a gap, but again, I don't know that we've identified what that is. Kind of as Maura said, is like, you know, we still don't know, we don't understand the current process enough to even say that a gap exists. You know, ultimately, this committee needs to make recommendations to the Board of Selectmen for things that the Board of Selectmen has the authority to actually act on. And so the two things for sure that the Board of Selectmen has the authority to act on are hate crimes, because we oversee a police department, or claims of discrimination against an employee of the town. So if there's an incident that occurs that is outside the scope of either of those, I would ask, I mean, I don't really know what level of authority does the Board of Selectmen have. If an incident happens down on Front Street between two individuals and it doesn't rise to the level of being a hate crime, there's not a town employee involved, what does the town's role become in taking that information, responding to it? I really don't know. That's the only gap that I see necessarily.
And that is, that's
but
exactly.
I don't know. One thing I don't know is what is the level of authority that the town has in addressing an incident like that. I don't know. The school department clearly has it because they oversee the behavior of students. But if you're talking about residents in the community, I just don't know what level of authority we have as a town.
Well, I don't know that there's a level of authority that we need in creating a process for reporting and supporting people that have been in this position. I don't know that we need any authority over anyone, really, except we do need a process for collecting information, supporting the person, sending the person to the right place, all of those things that can be really helpful. And we also need a process that includes always, when an incident like this arises, having a person of color in the room. That's completely solved if you hire someone of color or from an underrepresented community as a DEI director. But we don't have that, right? So we're to make recommendations, and I think there should be two, and we need to move on. The first should be to, yes, relook at the charge of our project team / subcommittee on incident-based and bias and make a recommendation as to what that charge should say. The second is to recommend to the select board that they take a second look at our charge and discuss whether they want it to include, now that we have agreed to have this project team, to include figuring out this process and collecting information in some way to make a solid recommendation on what the town should do. We don't have time to go and research all of the civil rights commissions that towns have created and all of that. We don't. But if we want to make a solid recommendation, we need somebody to do it. And we now have currently a subcommittee to do that work and do the legwork. Should that subcommittee also be a place that people can go? And if not, should the town have that? Because what's going on right now is what they have in place. The police and the Human Resources Committee isn't necessarily going to work for everybody, because they may not be in the school system, they may not be in working for the town, and they may not feel comfortable going directly to the police. So there's a gap. And I think we should think about the process we would like to recommend to fill the gap. Okay. Next up is an update on the collection of surveys from department heads. So this is all of the work that we've done to get responses from department heads. So who would like to lead us in that discussion?
I'll start us off. So I sent around, you know what, I'm just remembering, I don't think I did put it on Slack, but I did email it to you guys, to everyone. So hopefully everyone saw that. So I took all the responses, and I think, I want to say, Bob can correct me, there are 20 plus responses, I want to say. 22, okay. So, which I think is everyone. And
It's every department.
Yeah. So the only one we were still waiting on was from Fax, which was a late ad anyways. So very good response. So put that into the master spreadsheet, whatever you want to call that document. And you know, hopefully people have had a chance to look through it. I mean, there's a lot of information, right? And some, I'm not gonna rank the responses. Everyone spent a lot of time on it, and I'm certainly grateful, and I assume that everyone else is as well. So, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily the best use of our time, or necessarily fair in this forum on Facebook Live to start going through and picking apart the responses from the individual departments and individuals. That said, the next step, is we've talked about going way back, probably several weeks and months at this point, is I do think we need to prioritize specific departments where we can, you know, have some fruitful meetings right out of the gate. Okay, so I mean, I'll stop there to see if anyone had any other comment to the opportunity that you were able to look at it, you know, boil some of this stuff down. Like I said, I've and there's no surprises. It's the same, I think, departments that we've talked about all along, not because there's a problem child here or what have you. That's not how I would prioritize these things, but there are 4 or 5 that I think we should tee up, get our sub or project teams, I think is the correct terminology, get our project teams together and start brainstorming as smaller groups, and then start scheduling meetings to drill down a bit more, ask further questions, and bring some of this along.
Who do you think, since you've been working on it, and I'll ask anyone else that has been working on it to chime in as well, from what you've seen, what departments do you think we should kind of begin focusing on? Or are you saying that we should split up and take different departments?
I'm not necessarily saying that. So the ones that I think we should prioritize and are, again, it's not because I have any opinion as to how they're running their department, but the police department, the fire department, the library, DPW, and then the 5th one would be Board of Health / Social Services. Those were the 5 for me.
Okay. Ms. Risha, I know you've done a lot of work on it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the one that I changed my mind on after the survey was actually the public health, just in terms of, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And given that all the conversation we're having around COVID and what it's done to bring light to health disparities, I think that there's bias in healthcare and how we provide healthcare. And so I think it's an opportunity now to be still in the middle of a pandemic to help with some recommendations and to help shape it. I think it's a missed opportunity if we don't prioritize them. But going into it, I didn't think I was going to say that. There are other themes that I saw, but I don't know if we're just speaking about the departments now.
No, any of your comments.
Okay,
You know.
let me go down my list. 1 second.
Yeah, please do.
Well, I think some of them were self-fulfilling prophecies. Like we asked a lot of questions about hiring related to Bob's work. So there are obviously a lot of responses to that. And it just made me question a few things. Like everybody's talking about like, oh, we just need to cast a wider net. We don't have the pool. But does Bob have the resources to do more advertising other than the usual channels? So we should really look at the budget there when we go through the process. And because if all these departments want that and they want to cast a wider net, Bob can't do that if he doesn't have the money to help them do it. So I think that's one thing that stood out. I think the other thing is the stressing of qualifications and experience. And I think for me, and I feel so bad for you, Bob, I think it's training people to focus on skills. I think there is an inherent bias baked in that we need to prioritize people with experience, but having experience means you had access to opportunity, and not every population has equal access to opportunity. So I think when we look at hiring, sort of reshaping people's minds and hiring managers about that is going to be key. I think other things, I think very few people said that they had experienced or witnessed something based in bias during their time with the town. But I think that's also telling, because maybe we don't always know how to identify an incident based in bias. And I'm not saying people aren't empathetic, but I think it's very hard to be empathetic if you don't have that life experience. You just can't always identify it. So I don't think it comes from a bad place, but it does go back to a lot of the people who said they would like training and haven't been offered training perhaps, but don't know what kind of training. So I think that's a recommendation that could be put forth. I think Kevin Cafferty, I just made note from DPW, said it really well regarding customer service. I think he stood out to me. You know, he said, I quoted this, the ability for people to voice their concerns in a safe space. We talk about that all the time in these meetings about safe space norms. And so I think in terms of customer service and those departments who serve the public, I think that's key right there. I think he summarized it nicely. You know, the customer is not always right, sure, but they should be given equal access to resources and follow up. And then just quickly, other things, I think you know, the police, what stood out to me was they want to do community engagement. So I think if they're one of the first conversations we have, you know, if COVID halted that opportunity, if we could help accelerate it, because I do think it goes back to trust. If they're doing like good work, but don't have that community connection and the community doesn't trust them, then that's all for naught. Same with fire, especially if, you know, paramedics are the first on the scene, they need to have trust within the community. And then I think for me, finally, finance stood out because they noted procurement and they were open to help. Yeah, let me just stop talking. There are other things, but I'm gonna just stop.
Oh, go right ahead, go right ahead.
Sorry, final thing, okay. IT, I think this is just one example of maybe thinking like, oh, I don't have a role in DEI, but I think we all do. And IT is access to information, right? And so right there, I think we're all thinking about diverse communities as communities of color, but there's also like thinking about IT, the elderly community, like, oh yeah, here, go sign up for a vaccine, download this app. Like my parents can't do that. And so I think thinking about even information technology and how we approach it with an equity lens is important. So all that to say, I think it's not really, I don't know if it's on them. I think it's on us to help in these conversations, tell them like, no, you do have a role to play in this. Even if you do IT or if you're doing cable TV, whatever it is, there's a diverse population in there somewhere. And I think that is what stood out to me.
Yeah, I think training training is a layup. I mean, across the board, in my opinion. I think to the extent that we can, and again, I don't know the budgets or the costs and so forth, and all that needs to play into this, but to the extent that we can mandate training, I don't care if it's the police department or if you're the head pro at Widow's Walk. Everyone can benefit from that. And that was apparent, because that was wildly disparate across the different groups. I mean, there were certainly, some, obviously the police department, I mean, he did a fantastic job with his write-up and so forth, and kudos on that. And obviously there's a lot of mandated training because of the job, but it doesn't matter what job you have. Everyone can benefit from that.
Lucia, Nikki, I think you're muted. Lucia,
Yeah, sorry. Ms. Silvera, did you want to contribute?
Yeah, I had a few things to say before, but thank you for pointing out that Kevin Cafferty's responses were thoughtful, because, we do lots of discussions in the office, and I work with him. He's my boss, and he has the good fortune of having me there. And the reason why, which ties back to Nikki's point about having someone of color there, is important. Representation matters. And I think we wouldn't have known about some of those instances if not for me being there. I've had conversations with different people who maybe wouldn't have felt comfortable talking to someone other than me. I'm also an immigrant as well. I'm Cape Verdean. I speak the language. So they felt comfortable coming to me and talking to me. And also, it's my personality. I want to make sure that customer service is number one. I want to treat people with respect. I want to be treated with respect, the humanity component of it. So to go back to when I did raise my hand, I really liked your ideas about even a DEI director. I don't know how all of that works, but how amazing would it be to not have to be forced to do something to show that we want to be inclusive, right? Other towns where, maybe they were forced to do it, why should we have to be forced? That's something that we should want to do. If inclusivity is our goal, we want to take those steps to show that we care about everyone. We want to be this safe space. And I also agree that we should be a part of that process, whatever the process is, because yes, people will feel comfortable. I know when I see another Cape Verdean person or anyone that I have, some common ground with, I want to go to them first. And it's important. So as I said, representation matters. So that was just what I wanted to say earlier. Yes, we should be a part of that process. And if they feel comfortable going to us, I know that where I'm from, where I grew up, calling the cops is the very last step. That's the last step. As a matter of fact, if you call the cops on someone, it's deemed as disrespectful almost, especially when it isn't warranted, right? So, I don't want to talk too much, but yes, I agree wholeheartedly with some of your suggestions, specifically with someone of color background, someone that they feel comfortable talking to. So while maybe, some people haven't had these experiences in different departments, that's only because maybe someone wasn't comfortable enough to tell them that. They've been comfortable enough to tell me, right? So, yeah, that's just what I wanted to point out. So
thank you, Ms. Silvera. Ms. Dre, Reverend Stewart, Ms. Jacine.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on Lucilia's comment. Just looking at the spreadsheet, there was 22 departments. 13 departments answered, and I think the question is, I'll call it question number 7, which is the last question that was asked, and that's, have they experienced or observed in the workplace or through residence, a situation where, you know, a concern that could be addressed with the DEI efforts. So 13 departments didn't answer no. So I think, you know, I appreciate that. And I think that's wonderful that they're giving that feedback. And to Tom's point, training, education is important. And it seems clear that, you know, the folks in these departments want that. And I think that's our role to help them understand to the other points of having a person of color in the departments. But besides Lucilia, I think the other departments were answered by, you know, white people, but they still were honest in saying that they've either experienced it or seen it, and that there's room for improvement. So I was happy to see that, you know, 13 departments answered that question like that.
Nikki?
Yes, go right ahead.
Again, I think really both Tom and Celia have done a wonderful job of pulling together a lot of the information that was, you know, just a quick overview. Mm-hmm. And I would echo Tom's views that, and it really also, really Angela ends up saying it too, that people, I think, need training on what is DEI. I think that that was one of the issues when we first started, is that even understanding how would they address something about diversity, equity, and inclusion, weren't too sure how to do that or even what that looks like. So the concept of it, I don't think that systemic racism is well understood. I don't think that implicit bias is well understood. And I think that training for anybody who works with our citizenry is going to be very important. And again, looking at this survey, it was very clear that some people were on the page and getting there. Other people wanted to know, and other people, it's like, I don't really know. I mean, there were no negatives. There's nobody who's against this work. But I do think that the training piece as we go forward is something that we probably will end up recommending, you know, number one from this effort that we've started. We're not there yet, but.
No, and so the other, I mean, I was also looking at like what are sort of the common themes, and that was clearly one, is people, first of all, they don't understand this subject matter, to be honest with you, and there was a real lack of training, so they were really clear about that. But the other thing is, I mean, again, this is really information gathering, but also I kind of see it as like one of the initial steps, because we required every department head to do it. They had to think about this. They have to start thinking about their job in this respect. You know, they have to look at things from this lens. And so that's part of the process too. So even if we didn't get, with some of them might have not gotten great feedback from them, we began that process. And then I think when we do get a chance to sit down and talk to them one-on-one, and they begin to sort of think about this and really understand it better, I think that'll help us sort of move in the right direction. But you know, yeah, I kind of, with some, there's certainly with some departments that I really get the sense that they were just like almost in the infancy stage here, which is fine. I mean, you know, it's on us to kind of help to educate them and help them to sort of think about their jobs this way. So, and I've seen it change even in the conversations I've had with department heads. So we're definitely moving in the right direction. But I think this tool kind of helped us to kind of take some steps in that way.
Madam Chair, can I ask Bob a question?
Yes, of course.
Nikki's still there? Oh, there she is.
Yeah, here I am.
Sure, if you, Bob, you know, after you looked at that, is there anything in process yet today to bring in some DEI training modules?
Yeah, so one thing, I don't know if I mentioned this in the last time we spoke, is that we enrolled in a sort of online training program called Local GovU, which has a series of anti-discrimination training, sexual harassment training, a few others. There's some things that they offer to some towns and not us, like implicit bias training. This is all online training that all of our employees can partake in. So I have to work with them to try to add to the offerings. But that's something we just rolled out the past, I would say 3 or 4 weeks. I'm working on getting everyone registered, and then what we're going to do is we're going to mandate people take certain trainings. So we'll do that on a regular basis. I need to get everyone up and enrolled first. So we're in that process now. Particularly with this type of training, I always felt that it's better to do it one-on-one. You know, you doing group work and things like that, I think is always much more effective. It's, you know, fostering conversation and discussion. But with our current situation where we have to do everything sort of remotely, then I think this is the best option. But ultimately, I would love to do some live trainings, particularly when we get into issues around implicit bias. That's the one where I really feel like it's beneficial to have a sort of robust conversation about it as opposed to sitting and watching a video for like, you know, for an hour and a half.
Yeah, and even as I think a lot of you on the committee had brought up earlier, right, is one of the recommendations to bring in a speaker, right, for all town employees, because sometimes that has a greater impact to hear and listen to subject matter experts. So Bob, I was glad to hear you use the word mandate. That was going to be one of my questions, is I really want to see it mandated, that everybody takes some sort of, you know, unconscious bias or implicit bias training.
So we'll see that as soon as I can get everyone sort of registered, and that's, I'm chasing people down to do that now, then I'll send out a required training. I'll give them a deadline. It's a great tool that you can log on and run reports and see who's done it and who hasn't. So
and I think if you can let this committee know too what that timeline looks like, that'll really help them as well.
Sounds good. I'll do that.
Yeah, if we could have a look at the tool as well. I mean, you said other towns have utilized the same tool.
Yeah, it's through Mass Municipal Association has sort of purchased this tool and made it available to a lot of municipalities. So I'm not sure. I'll have to talk to them. You have to be registered. You have to pay for a slot. You have to be registered. So let me see if I can talk to them and find a way that I maybe can share the videos with you guys, just so you see what the offerings are. It's really geared towards police, DPW, fire. There's probably 300 trainings on it. So a lot of it, it's, you know, it's confined spaces and, you know, vehicle safety, things like that. But there's 20 or 30 of them that are more generic, and there's probably 10 that are specific to what we're talking about.
Okay, thanks.
I mean, I know I'm taking one at work right now, so I'm not in the, you know, public safety business, far from it. Yeah. So we can all, even if we work in the finance department or the clerk's office, all benefit from it.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think though too that when we talk about further recommendations, that this needs to be clear that this is an ongoing expectation and an ongoing educational piece. Because as I read those surveys, the sort of, as other people have noted, that sort of lack of like, I don't know, you know, means that the trainings are great, but that's just the beginning. And we need to build more onto that and make sure that obviously new employees go through that beginning training, but also that this becomes part of our ethos as a town and how we're aware of things, rather than just a one-off, we did the training, check the box, move on kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Anyone else? Anything else? So from the surveys, would we say that there is a need for a DEI committee and some of the DEI efforts that have already started in the town? Would anyone say that's not something that's needed?
Can you repeat that?
So from the survey, would you say that like some people are like, we don't even need a DEI committee for any reason at any time, but would you say that from the survey that it seems like Scituate, regardless of other towns, is in need of DEI committees and efforts and focus? Would you
Absolutely.
say?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, yeah. And I think it's a lot of it, again, and I don't want to put myself in other people's shoes and so forth, but you're a product of your own experience. And if you're working in a small department in a town like Scituate and you do not interact with people from other backgrounds, you're not going to think that there's a problem. And you are not going to think that you need to be educated on things like this. And, you know, and that's ignorance, but ignorance isn't necessarily a negative term. It just means you haven't been educated. You know, and it's not necessarily, I'm not villainizing anyone. You know, one training could change the way they think. So I think it's absolutely needed. It was those responses that opened my eyes more than Kevin Cafferty, who did a great job. And I'm not going to keep naming names because I said I wasn't going to do that. But, you know, certain departments really spent some time on this. And others just kind of not as much. They're the ones that need the training. And it doesn't make them bad people.
No, it just means they don't have the experience. They haven't had any reason to have that kind of experience.
Right.
Well, and it comes from the top down, right? As in any organization. So as we continue to make sure that it's a priority for the board and for Jim Boudreau and for Bob Clark and for Chief Thompson and for Chief Murphy, right? That's where you'll get that continuum to what Reverend Stewart was talking about, right? To make sure this isn't a one and done. And I can assure you, I can speak for myself, but I could guess that my board members feel the same.
Okay, so what is next? We now have the surveys in. You talked a little bit about it, Vice Chair, about our next steps are to begin getting more in depth, now that we have the answers, to take the answers and then kind of get more in depth into our second kind of set of questions. I will point out that when Mr. Boudreau came, he did say that the next largest budget after the police is Public Works, DPW. So is that, and it seems like they do a lot of everything. So is that a place that we should begin to dig a little deeper, follow the process we established? That's one question. And the second question is, alongside of looking at, you know, the responses and getting a little deeper into what the department's all about, should we also have a component of finance? You know, if this is one of the largest departments, like where is most of that money going and for what and when and all that other stuff? Should that be something that we do alongside of this kind of second round of questions?
Nikki, can I ask what the finance would be in regards to? I mean,
well,
we don't make recommendations about their budget. Are you asking for recommendations about DEI related?
Yes, well, where you spend your money, it tells you a lot, right? So for instance, we had Mr. Diaz come and say that there's only certain kind of amenities that you have on one side of town that you don't have on another side of town. So where is the money being spent and for what?
But that won't show up in a casual budget review.
What did you say?
That won't show up in a casual budget review.
Yeah, but should that be part of our questioning? Like we're moving into like the second round of questioning, right?
Well, I think that could be, I think that's what we're talking about now, is what questions do people want to develop? And we had talked about people who want to be on that group, helping to develop the questions that they're going to ask. Maybe some questions will be kind of standardized and others will be specific per group. Tom, did you want to chat about, you know, next step, do you think?
Yeah, so, and I think Celia, I think you brought up the finance department, right? As something that jumped out for you. And that was on my maybe list. So that was my next tier.
Well, I felt bad after I said it, because we said it one of the last meetings, maybe let them sit tight through tax season and then we can circle back maybe end of May.
That's true. That's true.
It's a tough time right now for finance. So, you know, I mean, I like the list that Tom had come up with
Board of Health, Fire, Police, Library, DPW is significant. I mean, now we're actually talking about, we pretty much, and if you add finance to that, that's pretty much all of the larger departments. And not all of them, but that's a good chunk, you know. And then some of the other departments are literally 1 and 2 person departments. So, you know, so I do think from that list, you know, those 5 that Tom had initially mentioned, you know, even that's a big chunk to bite off if we want to try to handle 5 departments in the next short period of time. But I think that all of those make a lot of sense to me. I've already talked to the library department. I've talked to DPW. I told them that, you know, be ready, that, you know, you guys may, you know, that maybe sooner than you think. So that they're prepared and they were both welcoming of it. So.
Okay. So what do we do next? Is it choose the departments? I think we're kind of narrowing close to, we kind of almost have our focus.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point we, like you said, Bob, those 5 or 6 departments, that's a big chunk. Do we start out with 2 or 3, and then split up into project teams? We'll have to go offline and have some meetings and brainstorm what we want that next round of questions to be. And then once we get that set, then we look to schedule separate meetings. Not in this forum though.
Right. So what do people think about that? Is that that's pretty much what our process says, right?
I think I hope so. Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but yeah.
Yes, that's what the process says we're doing.
Okay, that's
okay. Good. So
I'd recommend if people are interested in being part of one of these groups, that they let, you know, Tom know, so we can then start, you know, we'll start breaking out into groups of people who are interested in dealing with this. I don't know if everybody is interested in discussing further on policy on different departments. But if somebody, you know, wants to be part of the public safety discussion, I mean, that would be a small group discussion. People, Board of Health, you know, who would like to be part of that. So I think that starting to develop those questions and then coming back to the group to maybe refine them would be our next step. But trying to do that all in a large group would take forever.
Right. Okay, so anybody interested in coming up with the next phase of questions?
Well, the question is, anybody interested in a specific group that you want to be a piece of so that we can schedule a meeting and you'd be part of that meeting?
I would like to participate with the public safety, the police.
Okay.
And does it make sense? And this goes back to the earlier discussion around the incident and who to call and who to involve. And I think Lieutenant O'Shea mentioned that when something like that happens, they bring in Erica from social services. So do we want to kind of, I know it may not make sense to have one meeting with the 2 of them, but does it make sense to kind of couple those together so that we, as we're forming our questions, does that make any sense?
That sounds really good, Bob, Tom. To have her be a piece of that, because I think that would be our conduit to a social worker. Lots of times would be the police. So to have that they're working, you know, it's kind of good to know what their roles would be. She may, again, maybe she would have to say that she wants to do something separate also because she has a different role too. But
no, I've spoken a bit with her just about, you know, what even capacity and things like that. And, you know, I think she has an interest to some extent, but at the same time, she's just really flat out. But I do think it's actually possibly, you know, makes a lot of sense to actually begin with that the Board of Health, social services, I think we had facts all sort of connected together, having them as one of the initial groups, because that may, you know, I think it'll be helpful for us to learn what possibilities exist there. What do they have to offer? and because that may sort of inform future conversations as we look at sort of other departments. So I'm just wondering if it actually makes sense to begin some of those conversations initially, just to learn about, you know, what they do. And FACS is another big one too, right? I mean, because they do a lot of education across this town, and I know Anne Marie's really, you know, gung-ho about this. So it may be good to have that information before we even begin getting with other departments. So,
Well, I think that's an excellent idea. I do see a hand, so I want to recognize Mr. Doherty, Connor. Let me unmute.
Hey everyone, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to say, I don't know if these conversations are limited to the folks in the group, or if just anyone can participate, but if I can help in any way in any of these conversations, I'd love to. I know a lot of the folks on Scituate PD. I did a lot of volunteer photography work for them. Hello, Lieutenant O'Shea. We had a good photo shoot. And yeah, if I can help in any capacity in any of these conversations, I'm here and would love to. So I'll just wait to be tapped if that becomes applicable. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. Okay, anyone else? So I feel like we don't have solidly what we're going to do. We should talk to people and kind of get a sense of what the department is about from their angle, and the kind of get our arms around what the department is about. And then we have people working on questions.
I think they're all one thing.
Okay, so what do we start first?
So I
Are
would
these
say,
people talking to just the people they're going to be working with? So for instance, are they talking to, who are they talking to?
so what I would recommend is, let's take public safety. So public safety, let's form a project team. Angela's raised her hand. I'll raise my hand. Whomever else, to the extent that Bob, you can be a part of it. And then whoever else. Now with project teams, is there a limit?
We are now up to 8 members, which means that we have to be less than a quorum.
Okay.
So we cannot have 4 members still, I don't think. Or are you going to check me on this? But if we are an 8-member voting, we have to be less than quorum. So that still looks like 3 voting members can be on this. Now, however, let's say I'm also interested in public safety, but if other people are interested, I can step aside. But I could send my comments to Tom. So other people who are
3
not
voting
on
members.
this, right? And Mandy might be a part of this as far as developing questions, but that small group develops the questions and then lets us know, and people can comment on their questions.
Right. And then we work through who is that meeting going to be with, right? So if it's public safety, is it going to be Mark Thompson and Amanda, or whomever, right? Whomever they want to bring to the table. I'm sorry, Bob?
Yeah, right. Well, you just said it. Yeah, whoever the chief chooses. When we had created these different sort of groupings before, we had thought that it made sense to, between Lucia, Lieutenant O'Shea, and myself, one of the 3 of us as the sort of the town employee representatives participate. So I think Lieutenant O'Shea was going to sit on any of the public safety ones. I think Lucia was going to sit on the DPW one, and I would do many of the others, you know. So I think yeah, if we're looking at the Board of Health or the library, I would want to be involved in that process.
Maybe, Tom, if we could circulate that list of those few departments after this, and we can all just sort of send over our preference, just for sake of time.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And maybe we'll tee up 2 or 3, right? So I like Bob's idea. Board of Health, Social Services, FACS, that's going to be 1.
Right.
Right. Public safety is another. And then probably DPW, maybe as our first 3. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah, I think that sounds great.
And then we'll.
Yeah. And remember, we have 2 years, I mean, to get this done. Not that it should take that long, but we have 2 years to get through each department and each question session and information and set of recommendations. We have 2 years to every quarter or in between quarters, as well as every quarter, make recommendations. So let's start there, and then you guys will send out a sign up, and we'll begin the process that we laid out, right? Okay, awesome. Okay. Discussion vote on next steps for evaluation of initial departments. Do we need to vote on that? Because we kind of already have a process we voted on.
I'm not sure what it means. Nikki, can you
Well,
explain
it
what it means?
means, yeah, so one of the things that I was hoping that we would review before this is the video where Mr. Boudreau talks about the town's finance kind of process. And that was pointed out to us by Select Person Canfield. And I was just wondering if, after viewing that, if you had a chance to, if you think that there should be some component of evaluating the finances or questioning the finances of each department to make recommendations on whatever, on spending or why they are spending so much on whatever, or the process for choosing what to spend on. I don't know if that should be part of the questions. Anybody have any feelings about that?
In my mind, Nikki, without understanding how that would relate to specific DEI issues, I would not be able to delve into people's finances until, again, we've done the review. And we haven't done the review to be able to say somebody's not spending the right amount of money on something, in my mind.
Well, I guess the real question is, as a part of our analysis, should we include money, right? One of the departments we're starting with is one of the second largest, well, we're starting with the 2 largest departments, right? In terms of the town's finances. Do we want to include in our process that analysis or that questioning? Is that part of something that we want to do?
But that could be part of what the small group decides then, if they want to look at the finances of it. I mean, and that maybe that's a suggestion to Tom, as far as for each group, the people discuss what their finances are. I mean, that can be just a generic piece that's put as part of the discussions that we end up having. We don't have to have a separate process.
No, I wasn't saying separate. I was saying added into what we're planning to do.
Then just add a question, and then the group will, end up deciding on whether that's something they want to do.
Yeah, I think some groups it's going to make more sense than others, but it absolutely makes sense in my mind. I mean, I was writing just kind of in the column on a few of them, just saying, budget, question mark. Where are they spending their money? Is there additional funds? Are there grants? I mean, so, because some of the stuff that we're going to recommend probably will result in, well, how do we pay for that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also salary, right? So who's getting paid? Is it equal? Are women getting as much as men in the same positions, cross departments, interdepartmental, all that stuff?
Nikki, to me, that would be a whole separate thing that we could look into. I think that's something that Bob might have the information of. That's kind of a almost an equity evaluation, which I think if we did that kind of would subsume everything else we're talking about in a discussion. But that's more data driven, that I bet we could get the data for that. Well, if that's something you want to look into.
The most positions are union positions, so people are just, at a pay scale based on the hire date entirely. So again, that's something that, I think I agree with it. It's sort of data driven. So I think that's something we could probably do independent of any conversation with the department. I don't think it'll be particularly fruitful to sort of be delving into that issues around pay equity with department heads because, you know, the pay rates are sort of dictated by union contract more than anything else, so.
For every department or just certain departments?
Not for most departments. I mean, we have non-union positions, but the vast majority of the positions are union. So people have been basically just placed on a pay scale based on the hire date, and then every year they move up steps. So.
Okay. Well, I think, I mean, we're going to choose our groups, but I think that that should be kind of. I'm hoping that in the questioning that this question of finance permeates the analysis of the departments and you know, becomes a part of our recommendations for how to spend better. Like we talked about training, that costs. But if we don't know what is going on already, then we don't know what is possible or what to recommend. So I hope that that's part of the conversation. Okay.
Where's training sit? Does that sit in your line only, and is it an umbrella budget line? Training?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah.
Oh, the town administrator.
It's in his line?
Yeah, Jim
Okay.
has a specific training budget, yeah.
Okay.
You know, through actually, I mean, the police maybe has something specific, but virtually all training, like no departments really have their own training line. It all sits with the town administrator's office.
Ours sits with Mr. Boudreau as well.
Yeah.
Maybe as a task, we can just, you know, for some data for the whole group is get some numbers, you know, what percentage of that budget is training and what kind of training modules are happening now that are relative to DEI. You know, just, I know you talked about it a few minutes ago, but maybe just to have that, would it be helpful?
Right.
Okay.
You know, a lot of, you know, a number of our positions require, like, the, you know, the sewer treatment and water treatment require certifications and regular trainings and things like that. And so, you know, I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I think that Jim said in our last meeting that they actually haven't spent much on the training budget, mostly because, you know, because of COVID and there haven't been a lot of live training.
Yeah, that's why I'd like to get something really great in front of everybody before the end of the year.
Right.
Awesome.
We could end up something good out of COVID.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, finally.
Okay. Where are we? Oh, town discrimination policy discussion, Ms. Yassin and Mr. Clark.
Okay. You know, from our the select board, I'm kind of excerpting it. They state that the charge for the Scituate DEI committee is to review town policies, procedures, and budgets and make recommendations based on the results of such work. So Bob is our human resources director and is responsible for writing and updating policies that govern town employees. He came to this board asking for input on a couple of policies he was updating in order to give us a chance to review them through the lens of DEI, because that's how we look at things. We do not write policy, nor can we dictate what policies are for the town, but we can offer our input and our recommendation. So after he contacted us, I did review the anti-discrimination policy that I did provide to all of you. It's multiple pages, so I also gave an executive summary of the anti-discrimination, harassment, and retaliation policy. Did anybody have any comments or questions about the policy?
I have a few. I'll just pull it up. I think one's easy maybe recommendation is we make some reference to his and her and he and she, and I think if we can use they and them instead, it would be more inclusive in those spots. And then in the executive summary, it referenced that it would apply to employee relations, but also employee to visitor or contractors, etc. But then in the second Roman numeral policy, in the actual policy document, it only references, it says in a professional manner with respect and concern for fellow employees. So maybe that's just a missing sentence. And
I'm
then,
sorry, can you just, again, where was that, Sarah?
oh, sorry. So in the summary, you referenced that the policy is in relation to employees. So if there's something in between two employees, but also if it's in between an employee and a visitor, like if I were to go to the clerk's office and something happened.
Right.
But in that second paragraph, like where you talk about the policy in that long document, we only reference employees, not the other folks.
Well, so.
Or maybe I'm not interpreting it right.
I mean, the policy really is specific to employees. I mean, if we ultimately may need to develop another sort of policy or practice regarding, you know, what a resident or a customer does if they feel they've been discriminated against or harassed, right? The reason you know, as an employer, we're responsible for making sure that no vendor, a contractor, a visitor, a resident discriminates or harasses one of our employees. So we have to reference residents and contractors because we have to make sure that it's a harassment-free environment for our employees based on, you know, but also we have to make sure that our employees understand that they may not discriminate against a resident or a contractor or
right.
You know, a visitor. So that's one reason. I'm not sure. Maybe I didn't understand the question, but it really the reference to residents and visitors and contractors is really about the employee's relationship with them. So again, I'm not sure if I'm.
No, I think you answered that. That makes sense. And then just one overarching question is, I thought I saw in the summary doc, so Massachusetts has requirements for these types of policies, but then we could go further. Right. Did we go further?
Yeah, yes. So like, for instance, is the Mass Commission Against Discrimination, they have a model policy that they say, make sure you hit all of these points. And you can actually do a one-page policy that, you know, it hits all those points, but we went much further. So, you know, for instance, we have an obligation of supervisors to report before the end of the day, something like that. MCAD doesn't necessarily require that. It's a good practice to do that. I mean, the thing is, I want to make sure that if there's an incident of harassment, we want to know that we hear that day, because it may be a situation in which we need to separate the parties. You know, I don't want to have someone report an incident of harassment and then it's 3 days later before we hear about it because the harassment could continue, right? So there's a few instances like that in which we kind of went above and beyond what the MCAD model policy would do. I think we also probably went to greater extent in terms of sort of defining or giving examples of prohibited behavior. I kind of felt like the more the better, you know. I want to make sure that you know, employees weren't coming back and saying, well, no, I didn't understand, like that I couldn't do that, you know. So I felt like as elaborate as we could be, it would be to our advantage. So
I really liked the examples. I felt that those were ones that really help people see it, because lots of times they read all this and it's like, oh, it's just kind of like, oh, well, now it makes sense to me. Now that's something that's real.
Yeah, I mean, we're literally referencing like the library or the rec department, or, you know, so it's hard for them to kind of, you know, be dismissive of it. It relates to them directly.
Thank you.
So we ultimately, there's a process. I really, you know, I haven't run this by the town administrator. I wanted to sort of see if there was any feedback from this group. I also need to run it by the unions and then ultimately send it to the Board of Selectmen for their final approval. So there's a process to do this, but it's pretty straightforward stuff. I mean, it's again, it's MCAD model policy. So.
Well, thank you for allowing the committee to have an opportunity to weigh in on this. Obviously, it's very important and you've spent a lot of time on it. And so it's very, very much appreciated. And the Human Resources Department, we can check off. Only because you're here every meeting. We don't have to ask you any questions until the meeting. Great, so let's Any other questions? Anyone else? Anything else? I'm going to just ask one question. Does the town have a social media policy and a sexual harassment policy? And those are, okay.
Those are established policies. They've been integrated into the union contracts, which is not something I want to do with these policies, because then you have to negotiate them every single time you make a minor change. But so I did review those policies. I think the social media policy, it was good. It was well written in that it talks about some of the prohibited behavior is making, inappropriate comments based on bias, which was good, because I wasn't really sure it was going to be included in there, but when we checked, it was. So I think that was well done in that regard. The sexual harassment policy is pretty straightforward stuff, again, taken from the MCAD policy. So I think we're doing fine with that. I think that there may be other policies that we end up looking to roll out that I'd look to bring forward to the committee for some feedback on. So, but I think those two are pretty solid.
And will these be part of the town's handbook or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Good. Awesome. All right. Where are we? Discrimination. So discussion and vote on name for subcommittees / project teams. So it sounds like after tonight that we probably need to revisit the charge on at least one of the subcommittees we created. But last time we talked about not calling it a subcommittee, calling it a project team instead. Ms. Yassine, do you want to lead us through what that is, and we can take a
Yeah, just a quick reminder, and again, for Kate, I know that she's jumped right into all of this. By the way, Kate, previous minutes are posted. If you want to go back and see some of this, they're quite detailed. And some of the stuff we're talking about today, I'll be able to send you copies of, so that you'll see some of these things too. One of the things we found out from Lorraine Devon, who is the person who takes care of things for the select board, is that if you call something a subcommittee legally, it needs to have all open meeting laws followed, which means you would, again, not be able to have more than 3 voting members. You would have to post in advance, and you would have to have published minutes. And nobody wants to do that for a small group. I mean, that's kind of our work on our side time, and we come back and report to our meeting. And because it's fact finding, it doesn't make the decisions, the group makes the decisions. If we just rename it as either project team, that was what Lorraine suggested. I'm not sure, somebody last time suggested working group. But if we decide on one of those, and then anything that we have currently named a subcommittee, if we vote to rename that, and we're not voting to change what it does or anything else, that would be something else you'd have to do. But the way we posted this, just rename it either project team or working group. Does anybody have a big feeling on project team versus working group? Because then,
I like working group.
okay,
Just in my opinion.
I'm indifferent.
Yeah.
Anybody else like?
I like working group. I think.
Okay, so
That's
can I
exactly
make
what we
a
like.
motion that we change anything that is currently named subcommittee to a working group, and then it will have a new name? Somebody needs to second then.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Seconded?
And I will call.
Second was
the-
Kate?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And
I
will
need to
call-
see, otherwise yeah. Okay,
I will call the roll. Ms. Yassine,
yes.
Ms. Risha,
Yes.
Ms. Silvera,
Yes.
Vice Chair Secor,
Yes.
Ms. Swope,
Yes.
Reverend Stewart,
Yes.
Ms. Dre,
Yes.
and I say yes. So that passes, and we will make those changes. And I think a future item is to revisit the charge of the incidents based in bias working group. So let's do that next meeting. Okay. This is an item that I placed on the agenda, but I'm going to remove it. But I will say this, the last time we met, we talked with Mr. Boudreau about his finance video. We also got some information on the town meeting, which does not come up very often. The town charter, which there are minutes in which the proposed changes to the charter are. I would ask that everyone find those minutes and take a look at that. And we already talked about process for incidents based in bias. So I'm gonna remove this discussion from the agenda tonight. But I would ask that you view the video, which I think was in the minutes the last minutes.
Yeah, I found that, and I even got the part where he started it. I didn't actually view it, Nikki, so I
Okay.
couldn't have had a good discussion about it either, but
Yeah, so I think
it
we
is in the
should-
last minutes, and it's you've got a link to it as well as where Mr. Boudreau's part starts. So I think watching it is a real good, it sounds like a very good idea.
Yeah, so thank you very much for doing that. And if we can do that, if you can take time to watch that, that would be great. And then the town charter, there's minutes for the town charter committee led by select person Canfield. And in those minutes, you will see the proposed changes to the charter, which is basically how the town is run. So if we can all take a look at that, that'd be great. Moving on, an update on the HUC survey. We were gonna populate some things or what have you. Was that you, Vice Chair?
Yeah, but I didn't do it.
Okay.
I haven't reviewed anything else on that survey either, Nikki, so.
Okay, all right. I will take that off, but we should do that. If you'd like me to begin that process, Vice Chair, I can't, but I'm married to someone who can.
Yeah, I gotta find an Excel whiz. I can
Yeah.
thumb through it.
Yeah, well, yeah, we can talk offline.
Leave it on there.
Yeah. All right, so it's very late, but I do want to talk about the calendar. We have dates for our next meetings, May 18th. So we have dates through July. I want to talk about perhaps making a presentation of recommendations prior to the end of June, because tonight we came up with a bunch of different recommendations, and we probably should begin a list. I kind of keep the list of things that people say or would like to see. And I want us to think about maybe, because Select Person Canfield said we can come with recommendations sooner than the end of June, I'd like us to think about that. And it doesn't have to be as formal as our initial presentation. It could be something that we're working on, like one of the wonderful recommendations we had tonight was the training. We're getting more information about that. We talked about having a speaker. I don't know where that is in the budget or whose budget. So comments on our calendar.
I'll make a comment on the recommendation schedule, Nikki.
Mm-hmm.
You might want to wait until June at some point because annually the board reorganizes after the annual election, which will be May 22nd. So there will be a new chairperson who will be managing that agenda. So I think I just want to make sure you don't lose any momentum. So I would look to mid-June or whatnot after the board reorganizes.
Okay, mid-June. Okay, what do we think about a list, keeping a running list of recommendations? I think in the plan that Ms. Dre and Ms. Justine created, there's a project plan and then there's a
proposed project plan. In fact, Angela and I've talked about that recently.
Okay.
We didn't feel it was something we could put on the agenda because it was like way too full.
Right.
Already I started putting some things on. I think that that's a great place to put things on. So maybe that could be something that we just do a quick review of that. I will try to add in the things that we've discussed, and then anybody who has anything else, and kind of like just a 5-minute thing to start plopping ideas down and keep that on Slack, and then people will be able to see that. By the way, Kate, we have a Slack document that maybe Angela, can you contact with Kate to get her set up with that? We cannot comment on that document because that breaks the open meeting laws, but we can paste static documents on it, and then the document gets updated by the person who's in charge of the document. But it's a way of keeping things so that people can review later.
Okay.
So maybe project plan, 5 minutes for next time.
Okay. Yep, we should add that for next time for sure. Okay, and so what do we think about, well, the very first meeting in June that we have is June 1st. And so that means that June 8th would be a select board meeting, presumably. What do we think about that?
For me, Nikki, a lot of it is I'm not ready to go forward until we have something really fleshed out. I think that was Karen Campfield's real discussion for us last time, is that we can have all these things we're in the middle of, and we can tell them we're in the middle of all these things, but that's not making a recommendation. A recommendation is something that they would then vote to do, like they would vote to fund something. If we say we want the training to happen, or they would, for that, it might be even just vote that they're recommend that certain trainings should happen, and that Bob would be investigating what ones would be most appropriate and get back to them. So it may be just kind of almost a two-stepper, but we have to be really clear about what it is we're recommending, and we can always update them. And again, I think that's what we had said by the 29th, well, really July, is when we recommended that we would be the end of the next quarter, just to at least update people and then see what recommendations we actually have.
Well, we came up with some tonight, so I'm gonna try and add, or ask you to add. I think you and Ms. Dre have control of the proposed projects. Some of these recommendations that we came up tonight about the social worker and things of that nature. Okay. Anyone else about the calendar?
Nikki, I
Anything?
think it
Yep.
was Natasha who brought up, since it's the summer, if it makes sense to go maybe to once every 3 weeks instead of bi-weekly.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Especially
even
with
month, because August is going to be a tough month
Yeah.
for people traveling. I mean, I know some people aren't even meeting over, the summer, because it's a tight time with people coming, hopefully, as we get through COVID, with people not being around and just kind of also taking a break, because between these meetings, there's work to be done. And if you're not doing the work to be done between the meetings aren't going to be as fruitful.
True.
Yeah.
So if we do that, are we okay with having these long meetings? Because that was something that we talked about as well. The fewer meetings we have, I feel like the more we have to cram into.
Well, I think if we all commit to doing the work outside of these meetings and come ready to just, have the informed discussions, I think they can be kept to 2 hours. And I think it does allow us time, because now we have to schedule meetings with department heads outside of these and also form questions and work with each other. So we're not meeting,
Right,
even though
right.
this group's not meeting, so I think
Right.
it's.
Okay. So what do we think? Are we not going to have any dates in August? Does that sound right?
Well, we don't have to decide that at this moment. I mean, I wouldn't mind getting a little bit further along and then kind of polling people, because I'm really kind of, when we look at our thing now, when we start talking about the next 2 months, sound like they're going to be pretty crunch time if people are working on these meetings as well as planning other virtual meetings. And then there would be whatever meeting that you would go to with the select board. So,
Okay. August
Yeah.
is coming fast. As soon as the summer hits, it's like here and then it's gone. So,
well, that could be why we don't meet in August.
right. Well,
Exactly.
yeah, if that's what we decide, I think, we should probably do that sooner than later.
Well, there's July and August, right? So I
Right.
mean, I would recommend just moving to every 3 weeks for the months of July and August. I'll be here in August. I'm going to be out in July. So, what I mean?
Right. So what,
Not the whole month, but I mean, I know I'm taking a week and I know it's going to conflict with one of these dates. And
so one day in July, pretty much. Right? And then no days in August? Is that what we're saying? Because we have
no,
two
I
days.
mean, I
in
could
July.
still meet. I just,
Or maybe 1 July and 1 August.
yeah, something like that.
Just
What
kind
do
of
we
split
think
that
about
up
that? We have two July
Middle
dates.
of each month.
instead of 2
What'd you say?
July.
Yeah, we have 2 dates in July. We could just do one right in the middle, the 13th. And no dates in August?
Or 1 in August if we don't do the July one, or people need to decide.
Let's do 1 and 1.
1 and 1?
That's interesting.
Okay, so then we'll take off, the 27th.
Okay.
And we'll add August.
That I can't tell you because I don't know the select board meetings.
Oh, does the select board meet over the summer?
Yeah, we do. Hold on, I have it pulled up. One moment. We are scheduled to meet Tuesday, July 6th, Tuesday, July 20th, and then let me tell you August. That's what you want, right, guys?
Yes. Please.
Okay. And then Tuesday, August 10th, and Tuesday, August 24th. Now that's what's scheduled sometimes in the summer, but honestly, it hasn't happened since I've been on it. But sometimes in the past, if the agendas are light, they have consolidated and canceled one. But honestly, there's so much going on in town. I don't foresee that happening. It hasn't happened since I've been on the board. So those are the July, August dates that are scheduled right now.
Okay, so the 27th, we have an asterisk next to because we were making preparations for the next quarter's presentation.
I don't believe I have an asterisk next to July 27th.
I'm
I have
sorry.
an asterisk next to June 29th. So
Yeah.
July 27th, removing it is no hassle whatsoever because we would have already reported.
Oh, that's telling you what the asterisk is for. Is that what it is? I get it. Gotcha. Okay, so
So what about August 17th? As far as, I mean, if we're doing July
Yeah.
13th and August 17th?
yeah, that works. Okay, we have our summer planned. Good. All right. I do want to point out one thing. One, it's Asian and Asian Pacific Islander Appreciation Month. So please read or learn something more if you're not already in the know. And two, something very tragic has happened in the town of Hopkinton. A Black female child was found hanging from a tree.
When did that happen, Nikki?
That was approximately 2 weeks ago.
Why are we just finding out? Was it in the news? Oh my God, I didn't see that.
It's just coming into the news. It's just coming into the news.
Oh my God, makes me want to throw up.
So we did some talking tonight. I'm gonna let you go, but we did some talking tonight about what our responsibility is as people who have stepped forward and said, I think DEI is important and I think, and I want to be a part of the DEI committee because it's important to me. And that now more than ever has a very unfortunately huge I don't even know the word, obligation, because comments and small actions lead to very large things when left unaddressed, when there's no process to deal with them, when we don't have the right people in place. And in the climate that we have right now, it's absolutely essential that that we acknowledge our responsibility as members of this board or this committee, and the recommendations that we make are in line with what our charge is, but also in line with what our larger charge is, because it is life and death, unfortunately. So check the news, check the papers. It's slowly but surely coming out. And on that note, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion?
I just want to say thank you to everyone. Sorry, I know y'all want to go, but a lot accomplished tonight. So great job. And I know it's a lot of hard work. So thank you.
Nikki, I just wanted to make sure you saw that Connor's hand was raised.
Oh.
Adjourn. I just would hate to not.
Yes, Mr. Doherty.
Thanks for the unmute.
Yeah.
Yeah, her name was Michaela Miller. And there's a reason for the delay. And a lot of that has to do with the response from town employees to the incident. And I think the whole thing, if you read up on it, just highlights how important this body's work is, and how much I'm sure every town believes that will never happen here, though. And read the articles. This is incredibly important stuff that you all are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. Yeah, I totally agree with him that unfortunately we are currently in an age where what we're doing and who we've decided to be and stepping forward is really the difference between life and death for some people. And I hope that, and I know we do a great job, and I hope that as we move forward that we look at our tasks in that vein and to think outside the box of what currently exists to what could exist to make things like that never ever happen here. So, okay, I move to adjourn. Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, I will call the roll. Miss Yassin.
Yes.
Miss Risha.
Yes.
Miss Silvera.
Yes.
Vice Chair Secor.
Yes.
Miss Swope.
Yes.
Reverend Stewart.
Yes.
Miss Dre.
Yes.
And I will also say yes. Okay, be well, be safe.
Okay, at 8:53 p.m.
Correct.
Yes.
See